Hello, and welcome to Articulation. And here's what it sounds like. The North Wind and the Sun had a quarrel about which of them was the stronger. The North Wind and the Sun had a quarrel about which of them was the stronger. Articulation is, very simply put, how you move the mouth around in order to make the different sounds that you would make for speech. So if you're going to make a R vowel, it's how much you move the mouth around to make that R vowel. So for example, I could mumble a sentence, the North Wind and the Sun had a quarrel about which of them was the stronger, or I could over-articulate the sentence, the North Wind and the Sun had a quarrel about which of them was the stronger, and we would get a drastically different result. You can start to sort of hear how people are moving their mouth around once you see a few examples of it. So here is one such example, and I'll put links to the original videos that these come from in the description.
And you're feeling an urge to copy them.
You'll notice that it's not just you're feeling an urge to copy them, it's you're feeling an urge to copy them. There's a lot of movement in the mouth that accounts for that more expressive sort of voice. Here is another example.
Unfortunately for me, this meant that I had to wait hours.
Again, she's not saying, unfortunately for me, this meant that I had to wait hours. She's saying, unfortunately for me, this meant that I had to wait hours. That articulation is what accounts for that more expressive sort of sound. Hours versus hours. There are more or less two reasons why you would want to do articulation. One is for mouth space, so you can control your mouth space and you will get a much brighter, more feminine sort of sound, or a much darker sound. So for example, if I were to say a phrase with a dark sort of voice and then with a bright voice, the North Wind and the Sun had a quarrel about which of them was the stronger. While they were disputing with much heat and bluster, a traveller passed along the road wrapped in a cloak. The North Wind and the Sun had a quarrel about which of them was the stronger. While they were disputing with much heat and bluster, a traveller passed along the road wrapped in a cloak. And you can see how there's quite a bit of a difference there when you go from a large mouth space to a small mouth space. And the way that we do this is by changing the way that we articulate. Either we articulate less and we shift everything towards a sort of sound, which will be a larger mouth space, or we can shift everything towards brighter sort of sounds like E or eh or anything like that. Now, the important part about mouth space is that it shouldn't really change the vowel though. So we shouldn't go from ah to eh or e. We should only go from ah to ah. So it's still the same vowel, it's just articulated slightly differently. The way that we do this primarily is by doing things like pushing the cheeks inwards slightly and raising the tongue. Both of these act as a way of reducing the mouth space, and less space in the mouth means a smaller resonance chamber, and that means that you'll get a brighter sound. This is also why you will tend to get really bright S sounds or sibilants. For example, the difference between let us agree and let us agree. So we have bright S sounds and we have dark S sounds. This is more like a side effect of small mouth space, but it is quite useful in its own right. So now that we know what it is and how to hear it, and we can start to notice it in other people's voices, all we have to do to be able to control it is to just keep noticing it. Really, that's all it comes down to. You just have to hear it in other people's voices, and you will intuitively start to understand how to control it. It's a little bit like if you spend a long time in the presence of a certain type of accent, it's much easier to imitate that accent. All we have to do is hear those kinds of voices like this,
and you're feeling an urge to copy them,
and start to understand vaguely how they're doing it. And all we have to do is just understand that sound quality and sort of almost picture how they're moving the mouth around. From that point, it's only really a matter of just imitating that sort of articulation style, and you'll be able to do it fairly easily. Now, the more consciously you control this, the more trouble you're going to have. Vowels aren't just the letters that are like A, E, I, O, U. They are how you move the mouth around to make different sounds. There is a difference between O, A, and A. These are all different vowels, even though they could be represented by the letter A. There are quite a few of these, and there are also the different combinations that they can form. But then there are all the different words and all of the different places in a phrase that you could position those vowels. It gets extremely complicated extremely quickly, so it sort of stands to reason why it's so hard to manually control it. This is why someone can tell you exactly how to do an accent, but you won't be able to do it even on the 20th try. It takes a long time to learn. So with articulation, the best way to learn it is to notice it in other people's voices, to really draw attention to it and just hear it, and then to just vaguely imitate it yourself. You don't necessarily need to do mimicry, but you do need to hear those sound qualities over and over and over again. From that point onwards, you could just do something like the feminine accent, and you will get the same sort of things happening, provided you have those biases that you've built up by listening to those voices. So, in terms of what to do, just take notice of what people are doing to move their mouth around to make different sounds. You don't actually have to see how they're moving the mouth around, you just have to hear what the effect is. When you hear this for long enough, you'll start to understand how to do those same sounds. Then what you can do is just get something vaguely approximating that, and you'll start to get the same sort of articulation. And you'll do this intuitively, and that's what makes it much more effective. The other thing you can do is just try doing something like a Valley Girl accent, or a Bogan Australian accent. Both have high levels of articulation, and you will start to learn how you can move the mouth around a lot more, even to the point of sort of mocking those voices. And doing those kinds of voices will allow you a lot more control over articulation in general. Hope that helps, and I'll see you on the next one.